Good evening, everybody. I'm going to quickly share screens here. Get some things squared away. Well, back again for another Monday. As Dr. Williams said, it was a very busy weekend as we kind of digested some new information. My plan for this evening is to share a substantial amount of information with you, which will then provide you 2 weeks to digest the updates that were provided to the draft. And basically what I have this evening is, as Dr. Williams said, the work that was involved in the health and safety plan with this up-to-minute changes that's coming in as we're kind of pivoting and responding to what we're receiving, as well as the instructional plan modes of instruction that we're able to offer our families. So it's a lot to digest, as I mentioned. There'll be some time at the end to answer any questions. But again, tonight's motion isn't on the health and safety plan. You'll get a draft by the end of this week. And I do have a timeline at the end of this that I'll be able to share with you. So really breaking into 2 parts tonight, I want to talk about the health and safety plan and the updates, as well as the instructional model. But first, as always, I'd like to provide a little bit about how the plan began with setting some stages for our mission and vision, so working with the district's philosophy, but really breaking down our options in our guiding beliefs into 2 areas. As I mentioned in the athletic planning, we had a purpose to ensure that we are providing safety, to provide opportunities for students beyond the academic program. This one in particular was really to focus again on what are our opportunities and educational experiences that we can have for our students, but also with a firm focus on safety and what we're doing inside the facilities, inside our practices and habits to ensure the safety for all of our students, staff, and the community at large. And we'll talk more about COVID and the community responsibilities. So embarking on this challenge, we certainly know there's existing challenges. One of the early commitment challenges we found was this conflict where, you know, we're seeking to develop an optimal in-person learning environment, but we also know that we need to reduce the transmission in our community, and that's the guidance that we've been getting and the direction we've been getting from the state, and what our roles and responsibilities are as a institution that comes together and gathers. And certainly when we're hearing information from the state regarding the number of people that should be gathering in one area and what we're doing to reduce that spread. Number 2, as Dr. Williams said it, I mean, it's really in the minutes. I think I said at the athletic plan, you know, in schools, we often talk about planning for 2 months, and in the athletic, we're planning 2 weeks. We're really down to 2 days now. And in the case, it was really within minutes. The information is coming very frequently. It's changing very fast, and we want to make sure we're pivoting and responding appropriately. We also know going into this that there are some physical constraints. We were gracious enough to receive grant money, roughly $530,000. But there are some constraints that we have with regards to what's possible within our financial opportunity. For example, a massive overhaul of transportation. You know, we just can't hire a whole nother set of staff to split students. We don't have another facility to stick students in. So there are some guidelines that we have to keep under our eyes of fiscal responsibility. The scope, really, when we think about the tentacles of this, it impacts all the areas of education with regard to the classroom, the extracurriculars, the communication, the transportation, and then that interconnected piece to our families. So it basically covers every single thing we do. Cafeterias, all things that education offers. Timeline, as Dr. Williams said, it's important that we're making decisions that we can provide time for families to prepare for changes, as well as our staff. We want to make sure we're providing enough time for staff to prepare professionally on what they need to do to meet the needs of the students, either in a hybrid opportunity or an online opportunity. And lastly, throughout this challenge, which began really in May when we started to have this pandemic planning, there's some virtual living changes that people are going through. Communicating, planning, and engaging in a virtual environment is still challenging for some individuals. This board has gotten very accustomed to it. We're gathering on Mondays and we're becoming very used to it, but still there's a challenge with how we're communicating with hardware and each one of those items. So as we kind of kicked things off and moved into the health and safety plan, there's a couple key takeaways. As I said, with the athletic plan, the state, Pennsylvania Department of Education provides a template, and that template was allowing us as a framework to build our plan. It does embed some certain requirements, but that template is built upon the governor's color phase distinctions, which is a contingent design because it's subject to change upon the governor's orders. And I think even most recently, and we think about the current changes, we're not changing color distinctions, but we're seeing changes that are ebb and flowing in regarding to the structures of what we do to plan. And as Dr. Williams mentioned, the Thursday release was a pretty substantial change in that direction. If we go back 2 weeks ago, the mask order by the Secretary Levine was another change in that direction. So the second key point is all of the actions that we're building within that plan, we're building off the current guidance that we're receiving from CDC, the PA Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Education, and of course, the Governor's Office. We're focused on developing, there is a requirement that we select an option in which that we're going to have our options for learning in this year. So we have an educational option, and this plan that we're going to be sharing, as Dr. Williams mentioned, and communicated with the community on Sunday evening, is a hybrid option for K-12, as well as a full-time online option. And I'm going to get into both of those with a greater level of specificity tonight, but also share with you a timeline of how we're opening that opportunities to families to engage in a little deeper conversation about what opportunity may meet their families' needs at the current time. And lastly, as I kind of shared with the athletic plan, the COVID-19 health and safety education is part of that plan. We are an institution that's designed to teach and grow students. So embedded in the plan is our roles and responsibilities to help communicate hygiene practices, as well as educate the adults in what they're doing in their hygiene practices, and communicating in essence what we're doing as a safety measure. So that's a large part of this plan as it moves through. As Dr. Williams said, the plan did require certain elements that we had to break down. We created a pandemic team. I was fortunate enough to be the coordinator for that. Excited, and I will say it was exciting because we had a robust collection of volunteers, as well as some that we reached out to kind of embark on that challenge with us. It ranged from teachers to community members, administrators, representatives from the association, our YSEA. We had certainly our nurses involved in that. So we had a large range of communication. We also had survey input from both our staff and our community, our parents and guardians. The next part of that is, again, the type of reopening, which we talked about, which will be the hybrid option, K-12, and/or an online option for families. Those major key strategies that we need to address, and we'll go over tonight. And then the professional development and communication. And then, as Dr. Williams mentioned, lastly, a recommendation for an August 3rd action on approval. So this plan, you'll have, as he mentioned, an update this week that you'll have some time to digest and move forward. So what I'd like to do is talk about each one of these sections. And then again, as I said, we'll have some time at the end to address some details. You'll certainly have time to review this plan in its entirety. I tried to highlight with a double star to indicate, as Dr. Williams mentioned, some of the items that have been most recently updated with new guidance from the CDC, and what we did to make some changes to the overall plan when you see them. So first and foremost, the facilities and district cleaning, and I'll say Barry and his crew have been great with getting down to the conversations about what's possible, what we can accomplish with our current staff and our supplies, and then certainly what we need to order. And we've been busy ordering supplies to make sure that we're meeting the CDC guidance for those cleaning supplies. We're also ensuring that we're meeting the registered EPA disinfectant list. So we're making sure the supplies that we're getting do meet those minimum criteria as set forth from CDC. A couple quick items that we're going to be doing to ensure that the cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting ventilation is on par. These are part of the plan, and some have been add-ons that we've adjusted slightly with the language, certainly from your feedback as a board, with a little bit more strict adherence to the language, as well as the most recent feedback from the state. One of the, during the planning process, we heard a loud cry from the teachers to be involved in that process. So how we can support them in the classrooms. Cleaning kits are going to be provided to classrooms so that we can do that quick, high touch, high frequency spots as needed. Students and staff will disinfect their hands after using shared equipment. We're going to talk more about our reduction of shared equipment in the plan too, to do that. Ventilation will be increased through our air handlers, windows, and doors. Barry and his team have been working hard to make sure that our filter system, our air handlers are up to date and being refreshed so that they're working at their highest level. When weather's appropriate, we have the ability to open windows, and when rooms have windows that do open, as well as opening classroom doors to do two things. One, it increases the air exchange, and number two, it reduces the high touch areas. So we're not opening, closing with door handles, we're allowing ventilation to occur. On a hybrid model, the kind of the response or the I'll say the net result of that is that we have less students in the hallway, less students in the building, so we are able to open up our doors with less disruption, and it doesn't impact the educational environment, which is continual to be our response as we move through this. How are we doing this the best to meet the needs of our learners? We have access, actually already turned off our water fountains. We're being notations on that. At the younger age, the students know that they're not operational, and they just don't touch them on their own. And of course, the signage for safe and best practices will be displayed throughout the buildings, and we'll talk more about how that consistent messaging occurs. Some of the larger items we talk about social and physical distancing and the other safety protocols. In general, we're focusing on building schedules in the building that are static. That keeps our cohort of students together and in place, and it reduces the movement of students across the building. As Dr. Williams mentioned, when we think about that smaller age group, by having half numbers now, we're able to be even more static in our scheduling to reduce those movements. The next two items were direct changes from the updates from the CDC's release, or the guidance, the guidance from the PA, Department of Education, with limiting the number of individuals and interactions between groups. And what that was our very specific actions to reduce the number of students in classrooms and thus the hybrid model. Again, at least 6 feet of separation among students and staff throughout the day. It's not where feasible, it's a motion that we're going to make those actions happen, and we can accomplish those tasks with smaller number of students. The face coverings has been part of the plan, but I want to make sure I'm bringing that back up to the point that the protective face covering is worn in accordance with the PA Department, Secretary Levine's order that went out in July. And that's very succinct. When you leave your home, you're required to wear a face mask. Students and staff and adults will be required to wear a face mask on site. The only variation is during eating. And I'll kind of jump down to the first item on the cafeteria item, as Dr. Williams mentioned. That 6-foot social distancing minimum during the cafeteria or feeding times was a big catalyst of our change, that we could not meet that under a current all-in scenario, and that's where we made that change. But that is one area and one exception. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but certainly the conversation about face masks does come up. As we're reading and reading that order, it does allow for students to remove face masks when they're outdoors or in an area where they can achieve a 6 feet social distancing. So we are putting in measures in place that, let's say, for example, we're outside, there are mask breaks. We're embedding that into the process. It is advised by PDE that we embed mask breaks for students, but we must adhere to a minimum of 6 foot social distancing and create an opportunity for as much air exchange in those processes as well. Last, a couple items under general. Again, we have an employee, a non-essential personnel visiting process where they're not permitted beyond our vestibule entrances. Those will also be secured with plexiglass shields, hand sanitizing in key areas. And of course, that reference that we're saying, as Dr. Williams references, the PDE guidance that was released on their new website on the 16th of July. Classroom, under the current approach, we can now make classroom seating 6 foot apart and facing the same direction. Limited number of individuals in classrooms, and that's again another one of those large items that allowed us to have to come back and reflect on what the current plan was doing to ensure that we're creating a 6 foot zone around those students in the classrooms during the learning time. Adequate supplies to, again, minimize the sharing of touch materials. So what we're doing right now is we're going through all the materials, what's shared in the classroom that we, as a necessity, must be, had additional supplies, or ones that can be cleaned appropriately in between the sharing of resources. I'm going to highlight that as an important piece because I want to come back to this as we talk about the instructional model, about the sharing of resources and our ability to clean them, because that's one of the decisions that helped us come up with our hybrid learning model, where we're doing a day of an A student in and then the next day a B student, rather than doing 2 student days of the same cohort at a time. And a lot of that comes to how we can clean and utilize materials that are also in line with the instructional plan. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. And then lastly, the cafeteria area, we talk about the 6 foot social distancing, and again, creating those staggered schedules and reducing as many students in the cafeteria as well, and how that continues to unfold. More on the physical distancing. Recess, for example, is again a focused approach at the elementary level to make sure that we're staggering schedules. There's an example there. What I have at the bottom is an image of Indian Rocks Playground, where we now are zoning out students by cohort so that we can not only ensure 6-foot social distancing by activity, by choice of students in the playground, but now we're extending that out by cohort. So we're reducing the number and limited interactions of students in and amongst the school day. And again, I talked about the face cover order by the secretary. Communication. Again, there's that constant and frequent messaging, principals during their morning announcements, communication that's coming out of the building, modeled behavior that happens from our classroom teachers, as well as what we're sending out from the district level to continue to provide that communication about what we're doing to provide safe and secure features inside the building. And again, that underlying theme of how we're educating the community, as the community of learners, as well as our greater community, with what we're posting in signage, what we're communicating out, inevitably what our role as adults are in this process. We as teachers, we as leaders, model those expectations as well as communicate them. So when it comes down to our behaviors with wearing masks, our behaviors with communicating, hand washing and those kinds of things, pausing for breaks to make sure that we're ensuring that in the curriculum is an important part of that process as well. Transportation. Face covering order, same as before. When students, as per the order, when students leave their home, they are required to wear a face mask. They'll, of course, wear them on the bus for transportation. We are requiring a symptom screening to be required of all students, parents, and guardians prior to the bus stop or a school drop-off every day. Right now, transportation is a contracted service, so we are working very closely with Reliance to make sure that we're coordinating a very specific transportation plan. That will include things like strategic plans for embarking and disembarking the bus. For example, students will have assigned seats. We'll pay very close attention to family units being able to sit together while spacing everyone else. Students that are being picked up first will enter the rear of the bus, and then we would load forward. Those are the examples that are being taken care of at this point. Again, also making sure that we're having, as when weather permitting, as much ventilation as possible on that bus as they're moving through the system. So we've done our best to provide a very succinct and clear safety plan for our facilities. Now it's our task to monitor the student staff health. Screening. It is a required process for the staff as well as the students. I'm going to talk about the tool we're using in the next slide, but it's done every day before school, and no students with symptoms will be sent on that bus or brought to school, as with staff will not be attending school after that self-screening tool is being applied. So our illness protocol section will work as follows. Students or staff who develop symptoms or illness while at school will be isolated immediately. We have two buildings that don't have a separate entrance, but all the other nurses' suites, we're establishing a separate entrance for the entrance of those that are seeking nurse's office as a quarantine area. They'll remain in isolation until we can arrange for a supervised adult pickup, and we're going to establish those guidelines through the nurse's office, because not every incident that's going to come to that nurse's office will be COVID, and the nurses are working on establishing a triaging process to ensure that they're screening and symptoms for COVID versus your standard, I bumped my knee or I have a bellyache, those kinds of things, and that's what's happening during the screening process in the nurse's office. So the next question, and certainly one that we've had a lot of conversations about, is let's respond to a confirmed and probable case. And again, I'll come back to PDE's guidance that was released on Thursday has given much clearer definition to what our responsibilities are and how can we respond to those confirmed and probable cases. The way it's being outlined as to us in this direction as of Thursday, will be the Department of Health or a county health department. We don't have one in per se, but county offices would communicate and notify schools when confirmed cases are being processed through offices. They would then work with the York Suburban Pandemic Crisis Response Team to assess our current risk, our isolation and quarantine recommendations, and any other infectious recommendations that we need to do on site. Very clearly, they state in those guidances that the entire building does not need to be evacuated. It will be addressed individually with consultation from the Department of Health. And of course, with HIPAA, we are ensuring that we're maintaining absolute confidentiality with every individual involved in this process and that process as well. So it kind of works in reverse order as well. When we are being notified by a family of a confirmed case, we are to directly communicate with the Department of Health, and they will provide guidance under their current knowledge of what their relationship is with current other local agencies, their knowledge of contact tracing, and help us make those decisions based on the current recommendations from the Department of Health. So here's the screening tool that's going to be implemented, again, coming from the Department of Education on Thursday's release. It's done each day at school. And basically, students, staff, and parents would work through these series of questions where you're asking yourself, number one, if you have a thermometer or temperature at home, we would take that. But that's not the defining measure as to if you don't have a thermometer, you can't complete the screening. You still can engage in a series of questions that are listed on this page. For example, number one, are you currently taking fever-reducing medicine? If that's a yes, then you're a do not come to school response. Then you would move through any experiences in group A and or group B and aligning your symptoms to be as follows. If you have one or more symptoms from group A or two or more symptoms from group B, you are to stay at home and not come to school. And then communicate, and we would then, of course, communicate with the Department of Health. Now, how do we then monitor that either with a probable case or a confirmed case? Again, guidance has been recently provided with a little bit more specificity from the state in how we're working with the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Department of Health locally with our county emergency agencies. Staff and students with fevers and symptoms associated or confirmed cases, and this is direct from Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Pennsylvania Department of Health, is there to seek medical attention and get further evaluation and guidance from their medical providers. Our responsibility for staff and parents of sick will be advised that they are not to return until they've met the CDC criteria for discontinuation of home isolation. CDC is now providing very distinct guidance on what the isolation process is, and that we, in this process, must complete that quarantining process in its entirety before you are involved in any of the process to return to school. That looks as follows: a fever-free for at least 24 hours. That's a recent change. Just as of, I believe, 4 days ago, don't quote me on that date, it was 72 hours. Now they have reduced that to 24 hours, 10-day symptom-free, and a 14-day quarantine from that positive test. Again, coming back to that direct exposure, they are to follow the probable case guidelines from CDC and move through entire isolation process that CDT is recommending, and that again is coming from our most recent updates from Pennsylvania Department of Education, Department of Health. A staff or student who is quarantined following a close contact with a case may return to work only after they've completed the entire quarantine process. And again, this is a new update. There was some conversation saying, oh, if they have a doctor's excuse that says they can come back, they can come back. That is to our plan, that will not be the case. You must complete the CDC recommended quarantining process in its entirety before we will begin to even engage in the conversation of return process, and then you will be cleared by the Department of Health or our county medical associations. And again, that underlying theme of our educational responsibility. How are we consistently keeping students aware of these signs and symptoms? How are we consistently keeping them aware of what they need to do to monitor those signs and symptoms, both from their internal processes at home, as well as what we're doing with the staff? Signage, reminders, they're again placed throughout the building, as well as communicated at a high frequency in the building, as well as to the community. Now, that alone doesn't cover all of the things that we need to support our students and our staff in this process. We are looking at our attendance policy and guidelines and looking at how we can demonstrate some flexibility to students and staff and addressing that very specifically as they move through that quarantining process. Certainly employees with a higher risk, they have a very specific approach. We're going to work with them to make sure that we're reducing contact. Large gatherings, again, same boat. We're reducing those opportunities to move everything we can virtual. And again, if it's certainly under the 250 or the 25 gatherings, you know, it's not even in question, but we're moving those things like we do with our board meetings to make sure they're in a virtual setting. Again, continue to keep a relationship with our local Department of Health. And a big important part for us that came up in the planning process, as well continues to be one of our guiding principles, is the equity. How are we making sure that we've got families that either have language barriers, financial barriers, social emotional barriers, how we're continuing them to give them opportunities to be processed through these screening processes, and how we're communicating with their caregivers in that particular lens to make sure that we're working closely with those agencies. This is an important part because I know that Miranda, Ms. King, has been integral in that, and she will continue to be integral as she has continued all summer to keep those relationships alive, to keep us abreast of what's going on with those families. And certainly, we have students that have high level of needs that require additional specific plans that will be worked out on an individual basis as we move through their plans. Kind of moving into how we keep the professional development and communication plans in place. You can see that from this document, we're sharing it both in asynchronous and synchronous formats. Again, if our goal is to reduce the number of gatherings, like we're asking our teachers to do, then we're doing that as well at the office level. So what we can do to provide professional development with either a video series or Zoom meetings to provide professional development for staff in an asynchronous setting, we will, as well as both at a synchronous when necessary. And that might be protocols or modeled behaviors inside the building. Again, there's that consistent signage and messaging that we're talking about modeling. Another item that I did add to the plan, or we did add to the plan, is the education on reducing stigma. CDC has released very specific guidance on reducing stigma. We know that stigma can lead to labeling, stereotyping, discrimination, and other negative behaviors towards individuals. COVID does not have a name, doesn't have a race, doesn't have a color, and we want to make sure that we're educating students, staff, and our stakeholders of that to continue to reduce that stigma so it does not then impact the social emotional well-being of our students and our staff. We're also working closely to develop a social emotional wellness plan. Myself, Mrs. Hassenfuss, and Ms. King have established a kind of a goal-setting process for the social emotional well-being for both our staff and our students upon return, and that plan is being instituted underway, which will be a big part of that professional development as we work to navigate their needs as they return to work with students on site. And again, that underlying theme of communication, we keep it continual, we keep it consistent, and we keep the messaging in front. So that's a lot of the safety end. And as I said in the beginning, you'll be getting that updated draft this week to go back in and take a look at some of the items that we've shared with much more succinct language. And certainly thanks to the updates from the Thursday, we have more changes to that plan, which, as Dr. Williams mentioned, was the catalyst that we saw in the change to our instructional modes. And the current recommendation is a K-12 hybrid model under green and yellow. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, this plan is contingent upon the color phases set forth by the governor at the current stage. And then lastly is the red phase where everybody would be returned back to a remote learning. But I do want to dive into those with a little bit more specificity so we have an understanding of what that means as we start to have conversations moving into the next part of tonight's agenda. So when we're looking at the model itself, okay, for a hybrid model, what we're saying is that families have options. If we go back to that guiding principle, we wanted to provide families and students educational opportunities that meet either their health and safety needs as a family or their educational needs as a family. So under the green and yellow phases, which is identical, which is a K-12 hybrid model, students, families have two choices. A hybrid model, which is partially in school, partially remote, or a 100% online version. That is something that we're going to offer as a school system. I'm going to get into that in a few moments. Under the red phase, when and if the state pulls everybody back, we have a forward learning, and I'm saying it's a 2.0. It is vastly different than what we experienced in the spring of last year. I'm going to get into more detail about that, as well as a 100% hybrid, 100% online model. So let's unpack that a little bit more closely. So let's take a look at what a hybrid model looks like and answer a couple questions about why the development is designed as such. So a hybrid learning model is in our definition, is going to be a split A-B schedule with 2 days of on-campus learning and 3 days of off-campus virtual learning. And the net result of that is a 50% reduction in total population on campus at any one time, which again allows us to meet those needs of the safety plan, but also meet our ideal opportunity to provide online in-person learning to students. One of the questions that continued to come up with regards to health and safety, as was part of our planning process, is why are we not doing A, let's use A for example, which is students A to K on Monday and Tuesday, and then students L to Z on Thursday and Friday. And there's a couple reasons. Number one, I want to make sure that we're very clear that it has nothing to do with a deep clean. That concept isn't a word we've been using. Our facilities and our Department of Facilities with Mr. Gerling and his crew are doing thorough and in-depth cleaning every day. And so it's not that we need a day in the week to make a break to have a thorough or deep cleaning. We need to be cleaning as per the safety plan every day, multiple times a day on multiple surfaces. There isn't a need to have everybody out of the building to have a deep clean. We need a deep clean every single day for the protection of our students, just like we're cleaning the school bus every single time someone's on it. So that eliminates the conversation about why a midday a midweek break is for deep cleaning. It's not for deep cleaning. The reason why we're proposing a hybrid model of A on Monday and B on Tuesday is more of its design for instruction. So when a teacher begins to prepare lesson activities, they have the ability to design instruction for Monday that can then be picked up and carried on for Tuesday, which can then create an asynchronous opportunity on Wednesday that allows students to rejoin together as a full class if needed or if necessary, then allows the same thing to happen for the next 2 days. So as a teaching, planning, and communication piece, it meets the learner as well as the teaching and planning. That's one reason. The second reason, it also allows us to have a day where we can get together as a community of learners, our staff, to engage in things such as IEP meetings, 504 meetings, other student-based meetings, review of data, lesson collaboration, assessment review. That part is still important for us. So staff is on site on Wednesday and they're engaging in those meetings. It also allows us to extend opportunities for students that might be on site all day. For example, our artistic students are going to have an opportunity to be in school every day to keep their consistency in place with their IEP. It allows us to do that in a place to keep the learning moving in a successful opportunity to collaborate then at that midday and midweek opportunity. So the proposal that we have before you this evening is students A to K would be traveling on that first run Monday and returning back on Thursday. Students with L to Z will be traveling on Tuesday and Friday. The other days would be remote. Of course, we're certainly going to pay very specific attention to families that might have multiple last names or require something very specific where one family member may have a different last name than another. We would certainly make sure that we're aligning family groups together in that process as they move through that hybrid model. So that's the notion of why we established the current structure. It's designed for a learning sequence that's best for students. It's designed for a learning sequence that's best for planning, for instruction for teachers, as well as an opportunity to engage in both synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for the students as they move through. Okay, that's our hybrid opportunity. As I mentioned, there is also an opportunity for our families to engage in 100% online option. And this is exciting. I do have to say, and Dr. Williams and I have been having this conversation, developing a cyber program has been part of the comprehensive planning process and was on our long-range plan to begin to develop. And sometimes out of a bad situation, we have an opportunity to build and design something that's best for students. And that's where this opportunity is coming from. And it's an opportunity that we're excited and already have started. And it is what we're calling our Trojan Online Pathways, or TOP for short, because again, it's going to be the top of the game. But it is newly developed. It is 100% cyber option for families. As you can see, we're in the process. We've established our online platform and moving through. It is different than forward learning. It is not forward learning. Forward learning is our plan when the state pulls everybody back and we have to go to remote. To start, it is cyber, where students have an opportunity to engage in flexible learning to meet their needs based on a family decision under the current guidance from the pandemic. Long-range plan is this is an opportunity where our Trojan Online Pathways becomes very fluid, and we see in engaging of students in and out of classes, both in a cyber environment as well as a brick and mortar. But to start, this is a 100% online opportunity for families to choose. What makes it special is it involves our teachers. It's YSSD teachers, it's YSSD curriculum. They're creating it, they're teaching it, they're designing it, they're involved in it. It's a York Suburban School District diploma. We've worked with Woodson's. We're going to have food services available for these families that they're going to be able to come and pick up their meals like they were regularly on site. So that continues to move. To start, we are going to work on some basic enrollments for marking period. And again, that is an important part because I'll talk about a little bit later, but we do need a plan. So we need to get some ideas of how many students are going to be involved so we can decide how many students are not going to be in regular classrooms and then how many teachers we need to staff it. So to get started, we're going to be committing families to at least to engage in a one marking period commitment to at least get us started so we can start to make some decisions on how many members we need to staff it, how many members we need to engage in the teaching end and planning end of those courses as they move through. More information is coming on that. That'll be shared, but I wanted to make sure that as a board, you heard that 100% online option is just that. It is our 100% cyber virtual online school for students. It is a Trojan Online Pathways. It gives them that flexibility that they need. It is part of our long-term comprehensive plan. It is an opportunity for us to expand this, and in the years to come, it will continue to grow and develop. And certainly, I know. Given the individuals that are already on this train working, it's exceeding the expectations that we set at the very beginning. So that's an exciting opportunity from there. So kind of in a nutshell, at this point, we provided families with two very distinct options in-house. They may choose to engage in our hybrid opportunity learning, which is a combination of both on-site learning and remote learning, or may choose our Trojan Online Pathways. And then, of course, there are students that choose not to attend York Suburban in their educational opportunities, but we're very confident in the two that we're offering to be robust, rigorous, and engaging, and work with great results for our students. Last item that I want to talk about with regards to learning modes is, of course, that red phase. If we would move into red phase, we're moving back into forward learning. Forward learning, not like we learned in the spring. In the spring was new for everybody. And I think back to that time when Dr. Williams talked about the story, what happened on that Friday the 13th, and next thing you know, everybody's doing their best to get us across that finish line. Every time I have a chance to thank the parents, the students, the teachers, the administrators about what they did last spring, I want to make sure I give that thanks again, because that's what happened last spring. But like good teachers and good students, we learned a lot. We learned from the experience. We learned from the surveys that we sent to students, staff, and parents, and that helped us pivot and respond to make upgrades in case we have to go to forward learning again. We're developing stronger schedules that more align to a brick and mortar. They're more predictable. They're more planned. The grading expectations are equal to brick and mortar. Attendance and participation is tracking and reported. So it's much more rigorous, it's much more specific, and it'll be communicated as such. We learned from that. We learned from that opportunity, and as good students and good teachers, we made changes to our programming to ensure that if we have to go to forward learning again in a red phase, we would respond to that. So forward learning is very different than the Trojan Online Pathways. It is our response if the district is forced to move into a red phase, which shuts down all facilities like it did in the spring of last year. Okay, so what's next? As I shared in the very beginning, we're going to provide you an updated draft and health and safety plan before the end of this week, by July 24th. It's going to reflect, as I share in this plan, the new items that were mentioned, highlighted a little bit with the double star. In particular, what guided that was the 6-foot social distancing, which was catalyst from the cafeteria, and of course, our intentional efforts to limit the number of individuals in classrooms. So that's coming at the end of the week. You'll then have that 2-week review time. Both community as well as the board will receive all those updates. Also coming this week is a descriptive and more visual portrayal of hybrid learning model, and again, the Trojan Online Pathways. I gave a very high level description, so parents know that they have some choices to make a decision on at this point. Am I choosing a hybrid model where my children or my child is one day, my student, my learner is on site some days and remote some days? Or am I having a family decision to choose a 100% online, which is our Trojan Online Pathways? We're going to be providing this week a more detailed description of that. It's most likely going to be in a video session or an open session with some frequently asked questions, so parents can have some informed thinking, so that we can then send out a survey, again, at the end of this week, which will allow us to gather some information in next week. At this point, it's not a commitment survey. It's allowing parents to learn a little bit more about our options and then give us a little bit of feedback. Where are you currently with regards to our instructional mode? Are you thinking more 100% online? Are you thinking hybrid? Or are you choosing not to attend York Suburban? That allows us to begin planning at a staffing level and to begin planning at a structural level. Also, we're going to do a little more intentional about transportation. Are you currently, we asked this question early in the summer, we're going to ask it again. Are you considering bringing your child to school, or are you depending on the school bus transportation? Again, it allows us to refine and enhance that transportation plan we're making with Reliance to make sure that it's fitting to the most highest level our safety plan. We're also going to dig a little bit deeper in food services. Are you a family that's planning on having your son or your child or your learner pack? Or are you planning on buying? Again, allowing us to be strategic in our planning with regard. Again, these are ideas, not etched in stone commitments. And then we're also going to ask another idea about our technology infrastructure in case we have to pivot back to a red phase with remote learning in forward learning. After that information is gathered, we can start to plan more accordingly. We'll prime us up for our August 3rd board meeting, and then we'll get into a little bit more detailed commitments for families. We'll provide a more detailed window into the Trojan Online Pathways. So those families that are interested in it, we'll be able to have a greater, maybe online session where we can engage in a little bit more depth about what it looks like, a glimpse into at a higher level what it looked for my family and those decisions. And then we would start to take requests for commitments. And again, we'll come back to that one marking period commitment. We do have to keep that commitment in place as we can plan for those teachers and staff, as well as how we can plan for the instruction to end in that way. So that's the timeline. That's the information. Again, I'll be sharing that out at the end. I did include a lot of the reference tools that we've been using in the planning process as we move through this.